The sky above Valari Prime burned orange and red. Smoke rose from the cities below, twisting into thick black columns that reached toward the stars. Ambassador Torin stood at the observation window of his flagship, watching his world die. 3 weeks ago, the Drek Dominion had arrived. Their warships filled the sky like locusts, blocking out the sun. They demanded surrender. When the Valari Collective refused, the bombing began. Torin was old by Valari standards. His skin had faded from bright blue to pale gray, and his 4 eyes had lost their shine. He had served as ambassador for 60 years. He had negotiated trade deals, resolved disputes, and built friendships across a dozen star systems. But he had never seen war. The Valari were not warriors. They were scholars, artists, and builders. They had no weapons capable of fighting the Drek. Now their peaceful nature was killing them. "Ambassador," said his aide, a young female named Sarah. Her voice trembled. "The southern continent has fallen. The Drek are rounding up survivors." Torin closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. The Drek did not take prisoners. They took slaves. Men were sent to work in their mines until they died. Women were sold to breeding camps. Children simply disappeared, and no one spoke of where they went. "How many?" Torin asked. 8 million on the southern continent alone." Sarah paused. "Total casualties across all 3 home worlds now exceed 200 million. 200 million. The number was too large to understand. Torin had lived his entire life believing that civilization meant progress, that advanced species grew beyond violence. The Drek proved him wrong. They were ancient, powerful, and utterly without mercy. The Valari military had tried to resist. Their defense fleet, built for patrol and rescue operations, lasted exactly 4 hours against the Drek armada. Now only scattered ships remained, hiding in asteroid fields and hoping not to be found. Torin walked to his command chair and sat down heavily. Around him, his crew worked in silence. They were diplomats, not soldiers. They had no idea how to fight this enemy. They had no idea how to save their people. "There must be someone," Torin said quietly. "Someone in this galaxy who can help us." Sarah looked at her console. "We have sent distress calls to every known civilization within range. The Fenari claim neutrality. The Gorath are too far away. The merchant guilds have offered to evacuate our government leaders for a price we cannot pay. What about the others? The lesser species? Most are too primitive to understand our transmissions. A few have responded, but they have no military capabilities." Sarah hesitated. "There is one species we have not contacted." "Who?" "The humans of Earth." Torin frowned. He had heard stories about humans. They came from a small world in a distant arm of the galaxy. They had only achieved space travel a few centuries ago, which made them infants by galactic standards. Most species ignored them. Some laughed at them. A few warned others to stay away. "Why would we contact them?" Torin asked. "They are primitives." "That is what the reports say," Sarah agreed. "But there are other stories. Darker stories. Ships that enter human space sometimes do not return. Traders speak of strange weapons. Some say the humans fight among themselves constantly, that their entire history is one long war. Violent primitives. How would that help us?" Sarah turned to face him. "Ambassador, we have no other options. The Fenari will not fight. The Gorath cannot reach us in time. Every civilized species has turned us away." She paused. "Perhaps we do not need civilized. Perhaps we need something else." Torin stared at the burning sky outside his window. Below, another city exploded into flames. He could see Drek landing craft descending through the smoke, carrying soldiers to collect the survivors. He thought about his wife, who had died in the first attack. He thought about his children, scattered across the system, probably already captured. He thought about the millions who had trusted the Valari government to protect them. "Send the message," Torin said. Sarah nodded and turned to her console. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. "What should I say?" Torin considered for a long moment. He did not know how to speak to primitives. He did not know their customs or their language. He only knew that his people were dying, and no one else would help. "Tell them everything," he finally said. "Tell them about the Drek. Tell them about the attacks. Tell them about the slaves and the dead and the cities that burn. Tell them we have no weapons and no hope. Tell them we are begging for help from anyone who will listen." Sarah composed the message. It was long and detailed, filled with coordinates, casualty reports, and desperate pleas. She transmitted it on an old frequency that the humans were known to monitor. Then she sat back and waited. Days passed. The Drek continued their conquest. More cities fell. More slaves were taken. The Valari government collapsed, and Torin's flagship became the last functioning symbol of their civilization. On the 14th day, a response arrived. Sarah nearly fell out of her chair when she saw it. "Ambassador, we have received a transmission from Earth." Torin rushed to her side. "What does it say?" The message was short, just 3 lines of text, translated roughly into Valari Standard. Message received, fleet dispatched, estimated arrival, 47 standard rotations. Torin read the words 3 times. Then he began to weep. Help was coming. Someone had actually answered. Someone was coming to save them. Around him, the crew celebrated. They hugged each other and cried with relief. For the first time in weeks, they had hope. Torin smiled through his tears. He imagined the human fleet arriving, perhaps a dozen ships, maybe 2 dozen. Small vessels crewed by primitive but brave soldiers who had heard the Valari's cry for help and chosen to answer. He had no way of knowing what was actually coming. On Earth, in a massive underground facility, Admiral Park Do-Yun stood before a wall of screens showing fleet movements. 400 warships were activating across the solar system. Weapons were being loaded. Crews were being assembled. The largest military operation in human history was beginning. Park read the Valari distress call one more time. He studied the reports about the Drek, their tactics, their cruelty, their utter disregard for life. "Sir," said his aide, "rules of engagement?" Admiral Park turned away from the screens. His face showed no emotion. His voice was perfectly calm. "None," he said. "Weapons free. Total war authorization." The aide nodded and transmitted the orders. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity began to move, not as rescuers, not as peacekeepers, as something far older and far more terrible. The Valari had called for help. Something else had answered. Admiral Park Do-Hyun had not slept in 3 days. He stood on the command bridge of the Hammer of Sol, watching through reinforced windows as the rest of his fleet assembled in orbit around Mars. 400 warships, each one loaded with enough firepower to crack a planet in half. He was 62 years old. His hair had gone gray decades ago, and deep lines marked his face like scars. He had fought in the Sol unification wars when he was young, watching humanity tear itself apart before finally coming together. He had seen nuclear fire consume cities. He had walked through the ruins of Tokyo after the Third Pacific Conflict. He knew exactly what his species was capable of. Now he was going to show the galaxy. "Admiral," Commander Yoon Ji-woo approached from behind. She was 40 years old, tall and thin, with eyes that never seemed to warm. She had served under Park for 15 years. "Final fleet count is complete. 412 combat vessels plus support craft. All crews are aboard and ready." Park nodded. "Weapon status?" "All ships report full armament. Kinetic accelerators charged. Nuclear payload confirmed. Biological packages secured." She paused. "The silence protocol is ready for deployment." Park turned to look at her. "You sound concerned." The silence protocol has never been used in actual combat, sir. Only in testing. The Admiralty is worried about the psychological effects on our own troops. The troops will follow orders. Yes, sir. But seeing an enemy ship eaten alive from the inside might affect morale. Park almost smiled. Almost. Commander, our troops signed up to fight. They knew what that meant. If watching the enemy die bothers them, they can close their eyes. Jiwoo accepted this without argument. She had learned long ago not to debate with the Admiral. He was not cruel by nature, but he was practical to a fault. War was suffering. The only question was, who suffered more? Below the command bridge, the ship hummed with activity. The Hammer of Soul was the largest vessel humanity had ever built, a mountain of steel and fire that stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its primary weapon was a kinetic accelerator capable of launching tungsten rods at 10% the speed of light. A single shot could punch through any known shield technology and still have enough force to destroy a small moon. The ship also carried something else, something the official records called Experimental Counter-Biological System 7. The crew had another name for it. They called it the Gray Death. In the secondary hangar bay, Captain Baek Sunho inspected his own vessel. The Inchin's Fury was a destroyer, small and fast, designed to get close to enemy ships and tear them apart. Sunho loved his ship the way other men loved their children. He had commanded her for 12 years. Through border skirmishes and pirate hunts, and one very unpleasant incident near Jupiter that nobody talked about anymore. His crew watched him walk the deck, checking systems and reviewing equipment. They were young, most of them, fresh from the academy. They had trained for war but never experienced it. "Captain?" one of them spoke up, a junior officer named Kwon Taisik. "Is it true what they say about the Drek?" Sunho stopped walking. "What do they say?" "That they eat their prisoners, that they breed slaves like animals, that they burned 40 worlds before anyone could stop them." Sunho considered how to answer. The boy was scared. They were all scared. That was natural. The question was whether fear would make them fight harder or make them freeze. "The Drek have conquered 47 star systems," Sunho said. "In every one, they killed anyone who resisted. They took the survivors and sold them. Men to the mines, women to the camps, children to places we do not speak about." He paused. "Does that answer your question?" Taisik's face went pale. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now remember something else." Sunho put his hand on the young officer's shoulder. "They have never fought humans before. They have fought peaceful species, merchant races, scholars and traders who did not know how to resist. They have never faced an enemy that wanted to kill them more than they wanted to live." He squeezed once, then released. "That is what we are. That is what humanity has always been. When someone threatens us, we do not negotiate. We do not surrender. We fight until they are dead or we are. And we have not lost a war in 200 years. The crew seemed to stand taller. Fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Pride, anger, the old human instincts that had driven them across continents and oceans and finally into the stars. On the main bridge of the Hammer of Soul, Lieutenant Han Mirai worked at the communications console. She was young, barely 30, with a round face and quick hands. Her specialty was languages. She spoke 14 fluently and could decode most others with enough time. For the past week, she had been studying the Volari distress call, learning their language, understanding their culture, building a translation matrix that would let humans communicate with the aliens they were going to save. She had also been studying the Drek. Their language was harsh, full of growling sounds and sharp clicks. Their culture was simple. The strong ruled, the weak served. They had no art, no music, no philosophy beyond conquest. They were predators in the purest sense, consuming everything in their path. Mirai hated them. She had read the reports. She had seen the images. She knew what they did to the species they conquered. "Lieutenant," Admiral Park's voice came from behind her. "Report." Mireille stood and turned. "Translation matrix is complete, sir. I can communicate with both the Volari and the Drek. I have also prepared a standard broadcast for when we arrive." "What does it say?" "It identifies us as representatives of the United Terran Defense Command. It states that we have come in response to the Volari distress call. It demands the immediate withdrawal of all Drek forces from the system." Park nodded. "And if they refuse?" Mireille met his eyes. "Then I have prepared a second broadcast, sir. 1-4 after the battle. It will be transmitted to every Drek system simultaneously." "What does that one say?" Mireille's expression did not change, but something cold moved behind her eyes. "It says, 'We are coming for you, all of you. Run if you want, hide if you can. But know this, humanity does not forgive, humanity does not forget, and humanity will find you, no matter where you go.'" Park studied her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in years, he smiled. "Good," he said. "Very good." The fleet finished assembling by midnight. 400 warships formed a perfect grid in the space between Earth and Mars, their running lights blinking against the darkness like angry stars. Admiral Park took his place in the command chair. Around him, the bridge crew sat at their stations. Every screen showed green. Every system was ready. Every weapon was armed. "Fleet command to all vessels," Park said, his voice carrying through every ship in the Armada. "Today we travel farther than any human fleet has gone before. Today we face an enemy that has conquered 47 star systems and believes they cannot be stopped." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They are wrong. We are humanity. We have been killing each other for 10,000 years. We have burned our own cities, poisoned our own land, and nearly destroyed our own species more times than we can count. We know what war is, we know what death is, and we know how to deliver both." The fleet waited in silence. The Volari asked for help. They expected diplomats. They expected peacekeepers. They expected mercy. Park's voice hardened. "What they will get is us. And when the Drek see what humanity truly is, they will wish they had never been born." He gave the final order. "All ships engage hyperspace drives. Target, Andara system. Time to arrival, 47 days." The fleet vanished in a flash of light. Earth watched them go. And across the galaxy, something ancient began to stir. Ambassador Torin had counted every hour of those 47 days. He had watched his world burn, seen his people dragged away in chains, and listened to the screams of the dying carried on radio waves across the system. But he had held on to hope. Help was coming. The humans were coming. Now, standing in the observation deck of his battered flagship, he finally understood what that meant. The human fleet did not arrive quietly. There was no slow approach, no careful positioning, no diplomatic signals requesting permission to enter. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment 400 warships filled the void like a wall of iron and fire. Torin's crew had gone silent. Their instruments screamed with data they could not process, energy signatures beyond anything they had ever measured, weapons systems they did not recognize, ships so large they blocked out the stars. "By the ancestors," Sarah whispered. "What have we called here?" Torin could not answer. He had expected a few ships, maybe a dozen brave volunteers willing to help a dying species. Instead, the humans had sent an armada larger than any fleet in recorded galactic history. Each ship bristled with weapons. Each hull was painted black, as if they were trying to become shadows given form. And on every ship, written in white letters that Torin could not read, was the same phrase, the same message, repeated hundreds of times across hundreds of vessels. He would learn later what it said. "We remember what was done. We repay what is owed." A communication request appeared on his console. Torin accepted it with trembling hands. A human face appeared on the screen. Female, young by their standards, with dark hair and calm eyes. She spoke in perfect Velari, without accent or hesitation. "Ambassador Torin," she said, "I am Lieutenant Han Mireille of the United Terran Defense Command. Admiral Park Do-hyun requests your presence aboard the flagship Hammer of Seoul. A transport will arrive at your coordinates in 10 minutes. Torin found his voice. We thank you for coming. We did not expect such a response." "We always respond," Mirai said. Her tone was polite but carried something underneath, something cold. 10 minutes. Ambassador, please be ready." The screen went dark. Torin turned to his crew. They stared at him with wide eyes, waiting for him to say something that would make sense of what they were seeing. He had nothing. He was as lost as they were. "Prepare a shuttle," he finally said. "I am going to meet our rescuers." The transport that arrived was not like any Velari vessel. It was angular, sharp, designed without beauty or elegance. It moved fast, cutting through space like a blade. Inside, the seats were hard. The walls were bare, and the air smelled of metal and oil. A human soldier sat across from Torin during the flight. He was large, muscular, with a face that seemed carved from stone. He did not speak. He simply watched, his eyes tracking Torin's every movement. The shuttle docked with the Hammer of Seoul 20 minutes later. When the doors opened, Torin stepped into a corridor that stretched farther than he could see. The walls were lined with screens showing tactical data. The floor vibrated with the hum of massive engines. Everywhere he looked, humans moved with purpose, checking weapons, reviewing plans, preparing for war. Lieutenant Mireille met him at the entrance. "Follow me, Ambassador. The Admiral is waiting." Torin walked beside her through the enormous ship. He saw things he did not understand. Training rooms where soldiers practiced killing techniques. Armories filled with weapons he could not name. Medical bays where doctors discussed battlefield injuries as casually as weather. "You have done this before," Torin said quietly. "You have fought wars." Mireille glanced at him. "We have been fighting wars since before we left our caves, Ambassador." "It is what we do. It is what we are. But you are so young. Your species has only been in space for a few centuries. Young does not mean weak." Mireille's voice carried a hint of pride. "We mastered nuclear fire 200 years before we reached the stars. We built weapons that could destroy our entire planet before we learned to live in peace with each other. We are not like the other species in this galaxy. We did not evolve toward civilization. We fought our way there, one war at a time." Torin felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had called these beings for help. He had thought they would be like other advanced species, cautious, diplomatic, restrained. He was beginning to realize how wrong he had been. The command bridge of the Hammer of Seoul was enormous. Dozens of officers worked at stations arranged in precise rows. Screens covered every wall, showing fleet positions, enemy movements, and targeting solutions. At the center of it all sat a single chair, raised above the rest. Admiral Park Do-hyun did not stand when Torin entered. He simply turned his head and studied the alien ambassador with eyes that showed nothing. "Ambassador Torin," he said. His voice was flat, without warmth. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to meet you before the battle begins." Torin bowed in the Velari fashion. "Admiral, on behalf of my people, I thank you for answering our call. We did not dare hope that anyone would come. We always come." Park gestured to a seat beside his command chair. "Sit. We have matters to discuss." Torin sat. Up close, he could see the Admiral more clearly. The gray hair, the lined face, the hands that had clearly known violence. This was not a diplomat. This was a killer. A very old, very experienced killer. I have read your distress call, Park said. I have studied the reports about the Drek. I know what they have done to your people. Then you understand why we need your help. The Drek are monsters. They show no mercy, take no prisoners, and I know what they are. Park cut him off. I have seen their work. The mass graves, the slave camps, the processing facilities for children. His voice did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, something dark. I know exactly what kind of enemy we face. Torin leaned forward. Then you must understand. We need to be careful. We need to push them back, force them to negotiate. The Valari do not want genocide. We want peace. Park was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his uniform and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button and a holographic image appeared between them. It showed a planet, not Valari Prime, somewhere else. A green world with blue oceans and white clouds, beautiful, peaceful. Then the image changed. Fire rained from the sky. Cities collapsed, oceans boiled. When it was over, nothing remained but ash and silence. This is Therak 7th, Park said. Population before the Drek arrived, 9 billion. Population after 0. They did not surrender. They did not negotiate. They simply died. He pressed another button. Another planet appeared. Then another. And another. Dozens of worlds, each one burned to nothing. The Drek have done this 47 times, Park continued. They do not stop. They do not change. They find a species, they conquer it, they consume it, and they move on. Peace is not something they understand. Mercy is not something they practice. Torin stared at the images. His heart pounded. Then what do you propose? Park shut off the display. We are going to destroy them, not defeat them, destroy them. We will kill every Drek soldier in this system. We will burn their fleet to ash. And when we are finished here, we will follow them home and do the same to every world they control. Torin felt the blood drain from his face. That is not what we asked for. We asked for help, not extermination. You asked for help. Park's voice hardened. You did not specify what kind. Now you have humanity's help, Ambassador, and this is how humanity helps. But the cost, the lives, the Drek have already paid that price for you. 200 million of your people are dead or enslaved. More die every day. The only question now is whether we stop them or let them continue. Torin wanted to argue. Wanted to demand restraint, negotiation, some path that did not lead to total war. But he thought about his wife, dead in the first attack. He thought about his children, somewhere in a Drek slave camp. He thought about the millions crying out for rescue while the galaxy watched and did nothing. What do you need from me? He finally asked. Park nodded, as if this was the answer he expected. Stay on your ship. Keep your people safe. When the battle begins, do not interfere. Let us do what we came here to do. He stood and walked to the observation window. Outside, the human fleet waited in perfect formation. 400 ships, thousands of weapons. Millions of soldiers ready to kill and die. Go home, Ambassador, Park said without turning. Hug your people. Tell them help has arrived. Torin stood on shaking legs. He walked toward the exit, then stopped. Admiral, what you said before. We remember what was done. We repay what is owed. What does that mean? Park finally turned, and for just a moment, Torin saw something in those cold eyes. Not hatred, not anger, something older, something deeper. It means we understand what the Drek are, Park said quietly. Because we used to be the same, and we swore, when we finally learned to live in peace, that we would never let another species become what we once were. He turned back to the window. The Drek wanted to be predators. Now they will learn what happens when predators meet the species that invented predation. Torin left the bridge. He did not look back. His officers had brought him the sensor reports moments ago. 400 alien ships had appeared at the edge of the system. Unknown species, unknown technology. They had come in response to the Valari distress call, like fools answering the cry of dying prey. "How many ships do we have?" Grath asked. 812 combat vessels, Warlord, plus support craft and ground forces. 2-to-1 advantage. Grath's massive jaws stretched into something like a smile. "These newcomers have courage. I will give them that, coming here with such a small fleet. Their vessels appear heavily armed, Warlord. Our sensors cannot penetrate their shielding systems." "Shielding means nothing against superior numbers. Signal the fleet. Full attack formation. We will crush these primitives and add their world to our collection." The Drek Armada began to move. 800 warships arranged themselves into a crescent formation, the standard Drek battle pattern that had destroyed every fleet it had ever faced. In the center flew Grath's flagship, the Conquest of Flesh, a massive carrier that held 50,000 soldiers and enough firepower to glass a planet. On the Hammer of Soul, Admiral Park watched the enemy approach. "They are coming straight at us," Commander Yoon reported. "Standard aggressive formation. No flanking maneuvers, no defensive positioning. They expect to overwhelm us with numbers." "Of course they do." Park studied the tactical display. "They have never lost a battle. They have never faced an enemy that could truly hurt them. They have no concept of what we are." "Orders, Admiral?" Park considered for a moment. The Drek outnumbered them 2-to-1. In any conventional battle, those odds would be concerning. But this was not going to be a conventional battle. "Signal all ships," he said. "Execute pattern fury. Focus fire on their forward elements. I want their vanguard destroyed before they get within weapons range." The human fleet moved, not in defensive formation, not in cautious approach. They charged directly at the enemy, engines burning at maximum power. 400 ships accelerated toward 800, closing the distance with suicidal speed. Grath watched the enemy approach and felt the first hint of confusion. No species had ever charged a Drek fleet before. They always ran, always tried to escape, always begged for mercy. These newcomers were flying toward their own deaths. "Warlord," one of his officers said, "the enemy ships are accelerating beyond normal combat parameters. They appear to be..." The first salvo hit. The human kinetic accelerators fired in perfect unison. 100 tungsten rods, each one the size of a ground vehicle, shot across space at 10% the speed of light. They crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. The Drek shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, did nothing. The rods punched through them like they were not there. 20 Drek warships exploded in the first second of the battle. 20 more died in the second. By the time the Drek commanders understood what was happening, 50 of their ships were gone. "What is this?" Grath roared. "What kind of weapons are these?" His officers had no answer. They had never seen anything like it. The enemy was using solid projectiles, a technology so primitive that no advanced species still used it. But they were launching those projectiles at speeds that made them deadlier than any energy beam. "Return fire," Grath ordered. "All ships, return fire." The Drek fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams lanced across space. Plasma torpedoes streaked toward the human ships. Missile swarms darkened the void. The human fleet did not stop. They did not slow down. They flew straight through the enemy fire, taking hits that would have destroyed any other vessels. But their armor held. Their shields absorbed what they could, and they kept coming. On the Incheon's fury, Captain Baek Soon-ho stood at his command console and smiled. "Full speed," he ordered. "Target the enemy flagship." "Sir, we will not survive the approach." "I know." Soon-ho looked at his crew, these young men and women who had trusted him with their lives. "All hands, prepare for evacuation. Launch escape pods on my signal." The destroyer accelerated past the rest of the fleet. It was smaller than the human battleships, faster, more maneuverable. It dodged through enemy fire, weaving between plasma torpedoes and energy beams. Behind it, the crew launched their escape pods one by one, fleeing the doomed ship. Sunho stayed at the helm. He guided his vessel through the chaos, eyes fixed on the conquest of flesh. The Drek flagship loomed ahead, massive and terrible. "Sir," his last remaining officer said, "evacuation complete. You need to leave." "Someone has to fly the ship." Sunho's hands moved across the controls. "Someone has to make sure we hit the target." "Captain, go." "That is an order." The officer hesitated, then ran for the last escape pod. Sunho heard it launch behind him. He was alone now, alone with his ship, his duty, and the enemy flagship growing larger in his viewport. He thought about his family back on Earth, his wife, his daughter, his elderly parents who still did not understand why he had chosen the military. He hoped they would be proud. The Incheon's fury hit the conquest of flesh at full speed. The impact was visible from across the system. Two ships, one small and one enormous, merged in a ball of fire and light. The explosion tore through the Drek flagship, breaking its spine, igniting its fuel reserves, killing everything inside. Warlord Grath died screaming, crushed by falling debris, consumed by fire. On the Hammer of Soul, Admiral Park watched the explosion without expression. "One down," he said quietly. Then louder, "All ships, continue the attack. No mercy, no retreat." The battle became a slaughter. The human ships tore through the Drek fleet like wolves through sheep. Kinetic rounds shattered hulls. Nuclear warheads detonated inside enemy vessels. The Drek tried to retreat, to regroup, to escape. But the humans were everywhere. Every time they turned, another ship was there. Every time they fired, human weapons answered with devastating force. Commander Yoon coordinated the assault from her station. She moved ships like pieces on a game board, cutting off escape routes, concentrating fire on isolated targets. She showed no emotion as the enemy casualty count climbed higher and higher. But the true horror came in the final hour of the battle. 300 Drek ships remained, clustered together in a desperate defensive formation. They had stopped trying to attack. They were just trying to survive. Admiral Park stood and walked to the communications console. "Lieutenant Han, transmit the demand for surrender." Mireille sent the message: immediate and unconditional surrender or face destruction. The response came quickly, a harsh voice, speaking through a translator. "The Drek do not surrender. We would rather die than submit to primitive beasts." Park nodded, as if this was the answer he expected. "Very well. Commander Yoon, authorize the silence protocol." Yoon hesitated for just a moment. Then she entered the authorization codes. A single missile launched from the Hammer of Soul. It was small, almost invisible against the backdrop of burning ships and drifting debris. It flew toward the largest surviving Drek vessel and struck the hull without exploding. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the screaming began. The missile had released nanomachines, microscopic robots designed to consume metal, plastic, organic matter, anything in their path. They spread through the Drek ship like a disease, eating everything they touched. The crew on the human ships watched as the enemy vessel dissolved from the inside out. Bulkheads collapsed, decks folded. Drek soldiers ran through corridors that vanished beneath their feet, falling into nothing, consumed by nothing. No explosions, no fire, just silence as 10,000 lives were erased in absolute quiet. The surviving Drek watched their comrades disappear. And for the first time in their species' long history of conquest, they felt something they had never experienced before: terror. The remaining 300 ships broke formation and fled. They scattered in every direction, desperate to escape, transmitting warnings to their homeworld on every frequency. Admiral Park let them go. He wanted them to run. He wanted them to tell everyone what they had seen. When the battle ended, the Andara system was quiet. Debris drifted through space, the remains of 800 Drek warships reduced to ash and scrap. Not a single enemy vessel had been captured. Not a single enemy soldier had been taken prisoner. The human fleet regrouped around Valari Prime. They had lost 37 ships and 9,000 soldiers. Captain Bak Sunho's name was added to the list of the honored dead. On his flagship, Ambassador Torin watched the aftermath in stunned silence. He had asked for help. He had received annihilation. The Valari were saved. Their enemy was destroyed. But Torin could not stop trembling, because now he understood what humanity truly was, and he was not sure whether to thank them or fear them. After the Battle of Andara Prime, the human fleet did not stop. They followed the fleeing Drek ships across the galaxy, hunting them from system to system. Every Drek colony they found, they conquered. Every Drek fleet they encountered, they destroyed. The dominion that had terrorized 47 star systems collapsed like a house built on sand. Admiral Park led the campaign personally. He did not negotiate. He did not accept conditional surrenders. When Drek worlds offered to release their slaves in exchange for peace, he took the slaves and continued the attack. When Drek generals begged for mercy, he reminded them of Therak's seventh and gave none. By the end, the Drek Dominion no longer existed. Its worlds were occupied by human forces. Its military was gone. Its leaders were dead or in chains. 47 enslaved species were being liberated, their people freed from mines and camps and breeding facilities. Humanity had won. Ambassador Torin returned to Valari Prime as the reconstruction began. His world was scarred, but not destroyed. His people were traumatized but alive. Thanks to humanity, the Valari would survive. But Torin could not celebrate. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Drek flagship dissolving in silence. He heard the screams that never reached the void. He remembered the look in Admiral Park's eyes, not hatred, not anger, just cold determination. 3 months after the war ended, Torin requested a final meeting with the Admiral. To his surprise, Park agreed. They met aboard the Hammer of Sol, now stationed in permanent orbit around Valari Prime as part of the occupation force. The great warship had been repaired, its damaged sections rebuilt, its weapons reloaded. It hung in the sky like a guardian, or a warning. Park received Torin in his private quarters. The room was sparse. No decorations, no luxury, just a bed, a desk, and a single chair. On the wall hung a photograph of a burning city, flames rising against a dark sky. "Ambassador," Park said, "what can I do for you?" Torin sat across from him. "I wanted to thank you, Admiral. On behalf of my people, you saved us. Without humanity's help, we would have been destroyed. You sent a distress call. We answered. You did more than answer. You destroyed an empire. You freed billions of slaves. You changed the galaxy forever." Park's expression did not change. "We did what was necessary." Torin hesitated. He had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but now that he was here, the words seemed inadequate. "Admiral, I need to understand something. Why? Why did you come? Why did you fight so hard for a species you had never met?" Park was silent for a long moment. He turned to look at the photograph on his wall, the burning city, the rising flames. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Torin shook his head. "This is Sol, the capital of my homeland 1,000 years ago. During one of our wars, an enemy army captured the city and burned it to the ground. 50,000 civilians died in 3 days. Women were taken as prizes. Children were murdered in the streets. The survivors were enslaved." He turned back to face Torin. "We did this to ourselves. For thousands of years, we slaughtered each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We invented weapons that could destroy cities in seconds, plagues that could wipe out nations, poisons that could make planets uninhabitable. We became experts at killing. And then you stopped. Eventually, after enough death, after enough suffering, after we finally realized that if we did not change, we would destroy ourselves completely. Park's voice softened just slightly. We made a promise, Ambassador. When we finally united, when we finally built something worth protecting, we swore an oath, never again, not to us, not to anyone. Torin thought about this. So you came to help us because of your own history? We came because we recognized the Drek. We had seen their kind before, in ourselves. The strong preying on the weak, the powerful consuming the helpless. We knew exactly what they were doing because we had done the same things ourselves. And you could not allow it. No. Park stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and eternal. We are not heroes, Ambassador. We are not saviors. We are simply beings who learned, through centuries of pain, that cruelty must be answered with force, that predators must be destroyed, not negotiated with. That the only language some species understand is violence. Torin joined him at the window. Below, Valari Prime turned slowly, its cities being rebuilt, its people returning to their homes. Some of my people are afraid of you now, Torin admitted. They wonder if humanity will become the new Drek, if you will use your power to conquer instead of protect. Park nodded. They should wonder. Power corrupts. History teaches that lesson over and over. But that is why we fight the way we do. We do not conquer worlds. We do not take slaves. We do not build empires. We come when called, we destroy the enemy, and we leave. And if someone calls you against a peaceful species, if someone asks you to destroy innocence, then we refuse. Park turned to face him. We have rules, Ambassador. We do not attack unless attacked. We do not kill unless killing is necessary. We do not destroy unless destruction is the only path to peace. These rules are not flexible. They are not negotiable. They are who we are. Torin considered this. It was not comforting exactly. Humanity was still terrifying. Their weapons, their tactics, their willingness to do whatever was necessary, all of it spoke to a species that had mastered violence in ways the galaxy had never seen. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the galaxy needed a species like humanity, a species that could look at predators like the Drek and say, no, not here, not ever again. What happens now? Torin asked. What will humanity do next? Park walked to his desk and picked up a small device. He pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared. The entire galaxy, marked with thousands of star systems. The Drek were not the only predators in the galaxy, he said. There are others, species that conquer and enslave and destroy, just as the Drek did. Some are worse. Some are better at hiding what they are. He highlighted several sectors on the map. We are going to find them, one by one, and we are going to give them a choice, change or face destruction. You intend to be the galaxy's police force? We intend to be the galaxy's conscience, the voice that says enough, the force that answers when no one else will. Torin looked at the map. So many systems, so many species, so much potential for conflict, for violence, for the kind of horror that the Drek had inflicted on his people. It is a heavy burden, he said. We have carried heavier. Park shut off the display. We will make mistakes. We will face enemies we cannot defeat. We may one day fall, just as all empires fall. But until that day, we will stand. We will watch. And we will answer every call for help, no matter the cost. He extended his hand, a human gesture of partnership that Torin had learned during his time aboard the ship. Join us, Ambassador. The Valari know what it is to suffer. You know what it is to face extinction. Help us build something better. Help us create a galaxy where no species has to send a distress call into the void and pray that someone answers." Torin looked at the outstretched hand. He thought about his wife, dead in the first attack, his children, rescued from a Drek slave ship 3 months ago, his people rebuilding their world with human assistance. He had asked for help. Humanity had answered. Not with words, not with negotiations, but with 400 warships and the willingness to do whatever was necessary. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was everything. Torin took the Admiral's hand. 3 days later, Lieutenant Han Mirai broadcast a message across the galaxy. It was transmitted in every known language, to every inhabited system, to every species that had ever looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. The message was simple. This is the United Terran Defense Command, speaking on behalf of humanity. We have heard the cries of the enslaved and the dying. We have seen the works of predators who prey on the peaceful. We have witnessed the suffering of species who could not defend themselves. To those who suffer, call us. We will come. No matter how far, no matter how long, no matter how many enemies stand in our way, Earth will answer. To those who prey on the weak, your time is ending. We are coming for you. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but we will find you. We will judge what you have done, and we will deliver justice. This is humanity's promise. This is humanity's warning. The galaxy is watching, and so are we. The message reached 1,000 worlds. On some, it brought hope to those who had none. On others, it brought fear to those who had believed themselves untouchable. And somewhere, in a distant arm of the galaxy, a species that had never heard of Earth listened to the message and understood. The universe had changed. Humanity was watching, and humanity would never, ever look away.